When my mom passed away when I was the age of 15.
It can happen quickly. A lost paycheck, a phone call that changes everything. This is the first in a 3-part series called Unhoused and Unheard, the Black experience of homelessness. I'm Esther Dillard, and you'll hear 3 stories, one from a former college student, a retired senior, and a mom of 6. All are Black Americans who survived housing instability and the systems around it. For some, the fall begins not on a sidewalk, but when a safety net disappears.
When my mom passed away when I was the age of 15, I ended up going to Nigeria, where we're originally from, to bury her.
That's Adaora Onuora. She works with the National Coalition for the Homeless. She and her siblings were born here in the U.S., but when she went to Nigeria to bury her mom, things took a turn.
But long story short, we were left there and we had to go through a extenuating process through the American Embassy in Nigeria to be able to get here.
She says when they finally got back home to the U.S., they had no one but each other to rely on.
And we made it back and ended up straight into foster care because we didn't have any parents that could take care of us at the time, or any relatives that could take all of us in. So we were ultimately split apart. And I'm a little older than my younger sisters, so they were still within the foster care system at the time when I aged out. And they had a SELA arrangement, which was a semi-independent living arrangement, where it's not like the Section 8 vouchers or the housing choice vouchers, and it's not like foster care. It's more like independent living, but it's the middle between independent living and actually being on your own in an apartment. So they would give you a certain amount. Back then, I think it was like $750 or $850, and my sister and I had it at first. So we managed to find a beautiful newly built house in the District Heights area with a wonderful and just so our style, very elegant, very fresh, very modern. And we found a 2-bedroom basement apartment in that house. And the landlords that lived upstairs, they were so amazing, a wonderful couple that just, they let us do us and we let them do them. It was a wonderful arrangement. So I stayed there for my last year in foster care. And at this time, I'm asking my social workers, okay, what's going on? You know, what are my options? What am I supposed to do? Because again, I'm still working 2 jobs, minimum wage jobs at the time. I'm 20, about to turn 21. You can't get too many jobs with that. I am I'm in my second year of college, with the 2 degrees. So I'm busy. I have no time for anything, and I still can't make ends meet.
And Adaora is unfortunately not alone.
Homelessness is a very, very complex issue, first of all.
Donald Whitehead leads the National Coalition for the Homeless. He says nationwide, youth who age out of foster care face some of the steepest odds of housing instability. He also says the stigma of unhoused has traditionally focused on those who suffer from drug addiction or mental health challenges.
It's a lot broader than people suffering from mental health or substance abuse issues, which is kind of the prevailing stereotype, if you will. And mostly that's enforced by who people encounter on the street. So many of the people who are actually unhoused are people with substance abuse and mental health issues. And people see that as a moral failure, but really it's a structural failure. It is a failure of our system to provide for the needs of people with mental health and substance abuse issues. Now, the whole population is much broader than that. We have an estimated 1.5 million children in families that were counted by the Department of Education as people being homeless in America. We have our veteran population that makes up 10 to 20%. The largest sector of those who are unhoused in this country are 55 and older. So these are our seniors. There is a large proportion of people that are homeless for the first time, which means that they have been successful at some point in life and lived independently, but all of a sudden they couldn't afford what is the biggest underlying cause of homelessness. Underlying cause of homelessness, I mean, is the lack of affordable housing. Now, it is also overrepresented by people of color. African Americans, for instance, make up 13% of the general population, but 40% of the homeless population.
And Adaora says the stress of living in uncertainty made her have empathy for many who are working homeless like she was many years ago.
Especially for women, it's completely glossed over the fact that we still have an internal system that will operate whether you are housed comfortable, cold, hot, clean, dirty, or not, it's still going to happen. And all of that stuff costs. So you find yourself trying to wrestle through things and trying to figure out your budget on are you going to spend $20 on food, or are you going to spend them on tampons, or and where you're going to shower to change all of these things. Some people I've had friends that had to that were living in their cars in college, and they got like a Planet Fitness gym membership just so they can be able to use the showers and change in a place where they felt comfortable and seemed semi-homey in a way, just so they can get to work. And mind you, I don't think a lot of people realize as well that in this country, there are more people that are actively working and experiencing homelessness than those that fit that actual stigma of, oh, I'm, strung out on drugs or went to prison or, just didn't want to do anything. The lazy people, that fits the stigma. There are way more people that are actively working two jobs even, like no time to even sleep when you're worried about being homeless.
Whitehead says the system so far is failing the most vulnerable.
Well, I was looking at some of the numbers as far as HUD, and the numbers show that homelessness is at its highest level we've seen. And shelters say the demand has jumped since last year. And from where you sit, what has changed most recently that you think that has caused this jump?
So I'm going to be a little bit controversial here because I don't know if everybody shares this opinion, but I've just done some research on criminalization and the fact that we have 320 communities because I asked myself the same question: what has changed? So a couple of things. We're dealing with a economic downturn, which may result in a recession. People are being laid off. Many people didn't make it back from COVID. Their jobs were eliminated, never to be seen again. We also have the dramatic increase in housing costs. Some economists say up to 30% increases year over year for the last 2 years. And then you have the effects of criminalization. Now that's where the controversy comes in. So we've seen 320 communities create ordinances since last year after the Grants Pass Supreme Court decision that make it basically illegal to be homeless.
I don't know how I was able to get there, but 9 minutes later, somebody else's child wasn't able to get there.
After the break, you'll hear about a call that changed everything, a 9-minute window, and how Adaora finished school. Before the break, Adaora was sharing her story of homelessness. She was living on her sister's couch, working 2 jobs and attending school. All aid was cut off because she had aged out of the system as a foster child. She was considered an adult, and when it came to help, that was limited.
About a year into kind of sharing that space with my sisters, I got a call from an old social worker that just so happened to remember me. And this is why it's good to keep your number, because when they can't get in contact with you, they have to move on. But I think at that time, the window for the voucher program had just opened. And my social worker mentioned that I don't know how long it's going to be open. So if you have time to get here, come now, let's figure it out and get it submitted. She didn't even have to finish the if. I was at work at the time. I told them, hey, gotta go. I have to go. Life and death at this point. I have to go. So I left work expeditiously and arrived at the office, the DSS office. I want to say about 15 minutes later. I filled out that application as best as I knew how. My social worker was right there with me, helping me through the process. And we submitted it. And I took a breath of relief at that point, because I felt like I was a shoe-in to get a voucher. I just needed an opportunity. I needed a leg in the door. So that happened, and I lied to you not. 9 minutes later, there was another young lady with another social worker filling out the application, submitted it. The window had closed. 9 minutes later, after I'd submitted mine.
Wow.
And the young lady could not get she could not get her application through because the window had closed. They had locked up the program. Whoever was in it. And that was all that they were accepting at that time.
Wow. You had an angel working on your behalf.
My mama was there. She said, no, you can't let your baby be homeless. No. Yes, that had to be my mom. I could not imagine that was God and my mom, because I don't know how I was able to get there, but 9 minutes later, somebody else's child wasn't able to get there. And I felt so bad, because especially coming after that experience of being with my mom's side of the family and really experiencing the other side of life where you really don't have, it's one thing to have a roof over your head and say, okay, I'm using this government assistance, but when you really don't have, and the economy is not geared towards creating a whole bunch of jobs, everybody has to be an entrepreneur. Most people, if not everyone, even with the jobs, because sometimes you may be working for months on end and not get paid. I had aunts that experienced that while we were staying there. They were 4 months in when we even arrived, and we spent almost a year there, and they hadn't been paid. So it's really different to see. And I've been so grateful ever since then, because it's made all the difference in my life. And I think of that young lady that came after me often, because I wonder what happened, like what became of her, because she didn't get the opportunity that I was afforded by 9 minutes.
As far as Adora's voucher, it didn't solve everything, but it did open a door. With stable housing, Adaora finished school and now mentors youth transitioning out of foster care, helping them find resources she almost missed. But Adora's story is just one part of the homeless story. Imagine you work all your life and then an illness hits, sending your finances and life into a downward spiral as a senior. That's part of Donald Gardner's story.
But I'm sure God is so good. He blessed me because on Martin Luther King's birthday in 2021, a knock came on my door. It was my case manager.
You'll hear the rest of Donald's story the next time in part 2 of Unhoused and Unheard, the Black experience of homelessness. I'm Esther Dillard with The Color Between the Lines.